Meeting is now being recorded.
To study the administration of early intervention evaluation. So the purpose of the agreement is to complete a study and then report to the Joint Budget Commission by June 30th of 2019 joint recommendations for the future administration of the early intervention evaluation. The work group that is engaging in the development of the interagency agreement has communicated to stakeholders at the conclusion of each work group meeting. If you are not getting those periodic updates, please contact your normal contact at CDE or CDHS, and we'll be sure that you get added to that email blast. What I do want to reiterate is that recommendations for changes to administration of the early intervention evaluations based on the requirements in this bill will not take effect during this current fiscal year. So this is only a study to produce recommendations. There are 3 other individuals in the work group who will be providing information on this webinar. And the first is Paul Foster, who is the Executive Director for Exceptional Student Services at the Colorado Department of Education. Take it away, Paul.
All right. Thank you, Mary Ann. So I have the privilege of introducing some folks to you who have been working hard on this interagency agreement. So far, we've had 4 meetings since the beginning of August, and so we put in about 20 hours of meeting time as we begin to develop the bones of this interagency agreement. And much of that focus really has been, at this point, with information exchange between both CDE and CDHS in collaboration as we move toward building this interagency agreement. So let me introduce some of the folks, or tell you some of the folks who have been involved. You just met Mary Ann Snyder, who is the Office of Early Childhood Director, or is the Office of Early Childhood, the Director of the Office of Early Childhood, excuse me, I'll get it out here in a minute, at CDHS. Dr. Melissa Colsman, who is the Associate Commissioner for the Student Learning Division at the Colorado Department of Ed. Mary Martin with CDHS, who is with the Division of Community and Family Supports. Myself, Christy Scott, who is with CDHS as the Early Intervention Program Director. Heidi McCaslin, my colleague here at CDE, who is the Preschool Director. Lauren Morales, who is the Early Childhood Initiatives Manager. Chris Miller, also at CDE, one of our Child Find Specialists. Laura Merrill, who got us kicked off this afternoon, who is an EI Evaluation Manager. And then we also have an individual who attends our meetings from the Joint Budget Committee staff with the General Assembly for the state of Colorado. So we are facilitated or supported in this process by G. Winters, who is with Equinox Consultancy. So with that quick overview of who are the participants in the interagency agreement are, I am going to hand it over to Heidi McCaslin, who will give you more of the information regarding the process so far.
Great. Thanks so much, Paul. Well, good afternoon. I am going to share a little bit about the phases and the timeline of the work that we've engaged in so far. As you can see from this slide, this is a high-level overview of the components of the work that we're engaging in between now and next June of 2019. The work group has come together and defined the work in these 4 phases, which are represented in this diagram, and we'll cover each phase in a bit more depth on the next slide. But we wanted to share this broader view of the work that we're charged with over the current fiscal year. To provide a general overview then, phase 1 is where we develop the interagency agreement. That occurs in the month we've just finished and this month that we're in now to be completed by October 1st. Phase 2 of the work is actually the implementation of the study that gets outlined in the interagency agreement. That study is occurring for about 6 months between October and March of next year. And then phase 3 is where we will be reviewing the outcomes of the study. We are anticipating that that would be happening in April of 2019. And then the final phase at the end of this current fiscal year, in May and June of next spring and early summer, is where we'll be developing and submitting the joint recommendations then to the Joint Budget Committee. Importantly, the interagency agreement spans the course of this current fiscal year, and the interagency agreement is complete by next June when the recommendations are submitted to the Joint Budget Committee. So to summarize, the interagency agreement will define the components and the process for completion of a study from October to spring, and that will all be regarding the future administration of early intervention evaluations and a final recommendation to the Joint Budget Committee in June of next year. Throughout this process, the work group is committed to developing and sharing communication in an ongoing way and engaging stakeholders through the process. We'll go ahead and talk more then about phase one, which, as we shared just a moment ago, is the development of a short-term interagency agreement to define the study. As you know, we began meeting in the beginning of August, and the last meeting will occur prior to submission of the interagency agreement, which will occur in mid-September for the submission of the agreement by October 1st. The key activities in this phase include, as you've experienced throughout the month of August, communication to stakeholders after each meeting to provide some information and some progress on the work that we've been engaging in. During the current month then, in September now, we are drafting the interagency agreement. We'll be gathering some input and some feedback on that draft and completing the draft interagency agreement then for submission by October 1st. And this phase ends then with the submission of that agreement to the Joint Budget Committee, and we'll be sharing that signed interagency agreement with all of you as stakeholders to this work. The work group is focused during this phase on developing, as we said, a short-term interagency agreement. The work group meetings have been focused to date on establishing our work group operating procedures and the principles for engaging in this work together, including a plan for communicating with you all as stakeholders in the field, and then, as we said, beginning the draft of the short-term interagency agreement. The work group is committed to working together to submit one interagency agreement jointly to the Joint Budget Committee. The contents of the agreement are expected to include all of the items indicated in House Bill 1333. One of the items we'll include is how to utilize the $2.5 million allocated for the implementation of this bill. If you're interested in the full list of all of the items that are required to be referenced in the interagency agreement, that appears in Section 2 of the bill. In that bill, there's an elaboration of 11 items that must be studied, and so those will all be referenced in the interagency agreement. We'll move on to the next slide now. This slide shares a bit about the 6-month period of Phase 2, which is where we're implementing the study. This occurs between October of 2018 and March of 2019. During this period of time, department staff from both departments will be carrying out the tasks of the study as defined in the interagency agreement. Study progress will regularly be communicated to stakeholders, just as we've been doing through the beginning phases of this work. And we'll be engaging key stakeholders in some specific components of the study. So this phase is a study or a review of existing information about the early intervention evaluation process as it currently exists. There will be strands of work during the study period, such as gathering data on cost or location of evaluations. The interagency agreement will specify the process and the components of the study. There may be requests made for data or information to support our work in the implementation of the study. And our commitment to engage stakeholders throughout the duration of the study, both in gathering feedback to inform our efforts, as well as in sharing information related to the study. We will try to balance the need for our additional information and your involvement with your existing responsibilities, as we know that your time and energy is already fully committed. With that, I'll turn things over to Christy Scott, the Early Intervention Program Director, to cover the rest of the slides.
Thank you, Heidi. Phases 3 and 4 become more defined as we near the completion of the interagency agreement. Therefore, what is being shared today is an initial glimpse of what we believe this work will look like. So in Phase 3, we review the outcomes of the study. In April of 2019, we'll review information gathered throughout the study period. We'll synthesize and discuss learnings from the study, and we'll be communicating the outcomes of the study. In Phase 3, the work group will continue. We'll be coming together to review all of the information that has been gathered thus far, discuss and consider options, and begin to identify possible recommendations for the future administration of early intervention evaluations. We will ask for your feedback as we develop recommendations next spring. In Phase 4, we'll develop and submit joint recommendations. In May of 2019, we'll continue our communication with stakeholders. We'll have input on possible recommendations. And in early June 2019, again, communicating with stakeholders, we'll get feedback on draft recommendations. And late in June 2019 will be the submission of final recommendations to the Joint Budget Committee. Based on feedback from the study outcome, recommendations will be included in the final report submitted to the Joint Budget Committee. Our two departments have a commitment to gather stakeholder feedback prior to finalizing recommendations that are included in the joint final report. On this final slide, I'm giving you the contact information for Heidi and I, as we are serving as program leads for this work. Throughout the phases of this work, you will be hearing from us or members of our team who are also members of the work group. We thank you for listening, and we hope that the information we've given to you this afternoon has been helpful.
Thank you, everyone. And I just wanted to review, there was a request in the chat that the PowerPoint be sent out, so I will do that to the same group of you that received the post-meeting communication. And then there was one comment in the chat, question, by June of 2019, when recommendations are finalized, another legislative session will have passed. Is there any legislative action needed to make further changes? We don't know at this point because we aren't that far along in the process. Does anybody else want to add anything? Okay. All right. We are going to sign off. Thanks to so many of you that joined us today, and I'll send this out soon after the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.